Hey folks, Studio here with responses to some mailbag questions. And I decided to try a different format. Normally I'd be showing a game, but this is more of a podcast style format. You can still go ahead, check out the YouTube video and see what question is being asked, but this is something more for the background. So go find your favorite tunes, go ahead and just chill to the max because there's not much to look at here. The questions though, they're pretty good. I enjoyed all the questions you guys sent, even the guy who called me gay, because it turns out he was JK. He was JK. So let's go ahead and start with question number 1. What do you think of the new champion Zac, and where do you think he will be played most? From Zachariah2255. First of all, Zac is a champion in question being asked by Zachariah. I see that ZAC. I cannot highlight it apparently. Zac is going to be a powerful jungler in competitive play. That's what I'm feeling right now. And a lot of it is due to his range. He can have so much presence across the map. Once he hits level 6, his knockup is very, very powerful, both in team fights and ganks. But prior to level 6, he can just show up in a lane, and if there's any setup for him, it's a very, very likely to be successful gank. Late game, he has his W, the AoE that does damage based off max percentage HP. And that's a very, very good scaling skill. Max percentage HP is actually really powerful in a jungler in terms of damage because junglers don't necessarily get that much farm. So he's really set up to be someone who can do high sustained damage, provide a tremendous amount of CC, have very high mobility, with not a lot of farm. With farm, he actually scales decently, but it's not magnificent. So he is a great fit for the jungle. He's going to be a powerful jungler. I would expect to see him in LCS. I cannot confirm 100% whether he'll show up, but if I were a betting man, and I kind of am, just not betting very much, I would bet my dollar on Zac being played as a jungler. I do not know when he's available for sure. I think he might be available next week for playoffs. If not, he should be available for the promotion matches the week after, and if not, by All-Stars, I'm assuming he'll be around. But yeah, Zac is good. Zac is really good. His damage is high, his mobility is high. He does so much. That's really it. Like even though Elastic Slingshot, his gap closer doesn't have the biggest range, the biggest CC, it still sets up everything else. It's a 40% slow on his Q when maxed up. It's good. It's really damn good. 40% Q maxed on his slow and maxed on his Q. A 8% scaling or 8% max HP attack, which is insane, and of course the ultimate, which is I believe it's a 1 second knockup and a 20% slow for 1 second. That's so good. That is so good. Let's go ahead, move on to question number 2. Why do we not see any suicide 3v1 lanes with 2 people with single target stuns, i.e. Ashe, Sion, Taric, or the like? I know it ignores gold of the jungle, but it pretty much can seal a tower or early kill and control the lane later. Hey, that's not a question. That's a statement. Alright. That question is from AntiPeach, so shout out to AntiPeach. So there aren't really 3v1 lanes because of what you mentioned. The tri-lane has been tried before. That was intentional. And the problem really is that, okay, yeah, you might take a turret, you might take an early objective, but there's going to be one dude on the enemy team who can just vacuum up all the farm. And even if you can completely deny, keep the guy you're laning against at level 1, the problem is you're not going to get any experience or any gold. Well, maybe some gold on one person if he's taking last hits, but if you're pushing hard, it probably won't happen. But you're not going to have any experience on the tri-lane. It's just not going to happen. So what happens is, if you go for a tri-lane, you end up with 3 underleveled people, then the jungler will get a lot of experience. He can take all the buffs, he can take control of the map, even if there aren't any buffs, he gets free farm in the jungle, and then he can hit level 6 really quickly, and you'll have a bunch of people who are level 4. I've dealt with tri-lanes before. It really just ends up being, hey, wait out the early push. If they can't get the turret really quickly, then you're going to win. But once they get the turret, if they can spread out and still have a jungler, maybe it'll work. The reason that you don't see it too is it kind of already does happen. How often do you see in competitive matches the jungler show up to the AD carry and support lane if it's a 2v1 and just kill the turret? Like, they might get a kill in lane, they might dive the guy who's defending the turret, but generally it's just going to be like, hey, wait, let's just kill the turret. Let's just kill those nerds. And it's effective. it will win games. Just if you can kill that enemy turret early and just keep yours alive. So the reason you don't see it is because it does happen. There's a specific pattern to it though. So the jungler wants to hit level 3 generally. The AD carry support lane, they want to get some experience too, and you want to wait for a big minion wave to build up, and also try and deny as much experience to the enemy top laner in a 2v1. So what happens is the jungler will get a bunch of experience really quickly from that first clear because you get both buffs and you have every camp available. Then they'll swing to the 2v1 lane. At that point, there will be a big minion wave built up, and the support AD carry will be a higher level than the person they're laning against versus the one, and then they have so many number advantages. They have numbers in terms of people, numbers in terms of levels, numbers in terms of gold, and that's what makes it so the one can't defend themselves in that 3v1 dive. So really the answer is you do see it. It's just that it's more efficient to have the jungler come and roam in rather than just having 3 people in a lane. Pretty cool how it works out, how that mathed out. Thank you, AntiPeach. Are you going to SGDQ? Yes. Yes, Joachim's, I am. Joachim's 123, I mean. SGDQ is Summer Games Done Quick. It is a speedrunning marathon happening in July. I will be running Oddworld Stranger's Wrath HD, which is the PC version. And yeah, you should check it out. It's going to be pretty ballin'. I don't like to plug for donations much anymore after the Kickstarter way back when, but I am accepting donations to go to SGDQ because it's a pretty big feat for me. But no pressure. If you go to my Twitch stream, I'll just say if you go to the Twitch stream, you can find a link to it there. But that means you have to click like a link. So there you go. You have to click 2 links to get to the donation page, making you guys work for it. Yeah. Heading to the next question. Do you believe that every champion in the game can be viable in the right comp? Well, no. Viability is a very, very weird thing to talk about because some things that you think would be viable just because a character is powerful aren't because there's another character that's just as powerful and has more options. So for a while, the best example of this was Corki versus Ezreal. This was before Ezreal really picked up in power. This was like March of last year, where Corki was one of the best AD carries in the game, considered the best. What did Ezreal provide at the time? Well, he had his Q, his poke, which was decent. He had the attack speed buff and attack speed debuff. I think that he still had that back then, but people didn't really think about it then. This was before he picked up, so his W didn't exist essentially. He had the Arcane Shift, which is like Valkyrie. And then Ezreal had the long global ultimate, which Corki doesn't have an equivalent of. At the time, Corki had the early lane control from his Phosphorus Bomb, which was really good for trading, so he could win a lane really early, really quickly. He dealt more damage because of his passive. He had a really good poke from the rockets, and he was considered a better Ezreal. So at the time, assuming Ezreal, like you ignore Ezreal's W, because that was not being factored in well. So at the time, before people played Ezreal and like discovered his strengths, Corki was just a better Ezreal. Like, why would you pick not Corki? And that's kind of the problem. There are some characters that are just too similar to other characters, but they're weaker. I think actually Shyvana and Singed is kind of a good example, because Shyvana does a lot of very high AoE magic damage. Singed does a lot of very high AoE magic damage. Shyvana does have some physical, but her Burnout, Ultimate, and Fireball are all magical, and even the Fireball proc on her passive is magical. So she's got a lot of magic damage. They both kind of run into the enemy team, and they're just gonna sit there and do damage. Except Singed can do more damage because his poison will always be on, unlike Burnout. And like it's just Singed is kind of a better Shyvana in the way it works out. Weird to think about, but if Shyvana ever gets really good jungling potential again, and can actually do more than just kind of kill creeps relatively well, like if she can get really good gank pressure, or her ultimate in teamfights can be more powerful and be more disruptive, then Singed and Shyvana will do different things on comps, and Shyvana will be viable. And I'm using Singed and Shyvana even though Shyvana isn't considered a jungler, just because Shyvana in the jungle, they will both do similar things, and Singed has an easier way to get farm with it, so that also factors into it. So the answer is no, not everybody will be viable. But it's more or less, is a character unique? If a character is unique enough, then yeah, you can always find a moment for them. Yeah, you'll find that way to put in LeBlanc because she has a lot of mobility and it's instant. Even though she can be considered very similar to Kassadin in a lot of ways because they both have blinks, they both have really high assassin style damage, and Kassadin actually has really strong landing because of his passive against a lot of mids. LeBlanc is someone who, well, she can roam really early in the game. Her ultimate provides her a lot more mobility with using the Mimic on W, so there's just like a lot of options with LeBlanc, so she's still considered somewhat viable. Just really, if you think a character is viable, try and think of other characters that could fulfill that role. And if there is someone who could fulfill that role and do it better, then essentially your character is not viable. The exception, there is an exception, would be if there are two similar characters and one is more powerful, but they're both really, really strong. Because then you could ban out the more powerful one and use the weaker one. Let's assume back with my Ezreal Corki example, and this actually was kind of the case in mid-June, but Ezreal had taken a more unique role. With Ezreal and Corki, both of them were incredibly powerful, and they were both really similar, so you could ban one out and just choose the other. Like, assuming there were no differences, it's like, well, you have two powerful carries anyways. They're so powerful that they'll make them work. But I'm assuming if you're asking about this, you don't mean the really OP champs, even if they're similar OP champs, because if that's the case, then, well, they're OP, yeah, they're viable. Thank you. Foxacon94. Do you enjoy casting with Wombat? How do you get to casting the TSM tournaments? Hell yeah, casting with Wombat's fun. It's a very, very specific thing. Wombat caters to the TSM, not to the TSM, but the solo mid crowd, the people who will follow the solo mid tournaments, and it's a blast playing these tournaments. Or not playing, but commenting these tournaments. Just because you get to see so many different teams at the invitationals. You get to we're doing a lot of European stuff right now, and the European stuff is just really fun. It's just so much going on all the time. So it's just like I get to see a bunch of new teams. I get to talk with Wombat. Wombat and I don't agree on that many things. We're actually very different people. I think that kind of makes the cast fun. We both like to talk about food, but like I don't know if you ever heard me and Wombat talk about food. We tend to actually talk about very different types of foods. And then I'm pretty sure politically, me and Wombat are completely different sides of spectrums in a lot of social perspectives and stuff like that. And it's actually fun because we're different. How did I get to cast in the TSM tournaments? I got a recommendation from someone I knew from Solo Mid who works on the webed now. And I think he's doing stuff for Dota Hut now. And I got recommended by him for one of the early tournaments back in June, and I've just been with them ever since. It's actually a really cool group. Casting with Wombat is a unique thing. Thank you. TheEmsx. No, that's not a K. TheEmsx. EmsX. I hate you. Nah, I love you. Question number 6. Question number 6 is a lot of questions, so we'll go through it, but they were fun questions. Why are not more people using hybrid pen runes on AP mids? In theory, hybrid pen plus both 10% penetration masteries seem incredibly strong. The thing with 10% penetration masteries is that I think the way the math works out, and this is something that I will not 100% confirm, so you should probably check the math yourself. Plus, this is also 8%, so I'll make it an 8 now. I believe it's 8% unless you changed it, in which case I'll feel bad. But if you go for both penetration masteries, you're not going to have enough points to get some of the stuff you want later on in the tree. And you have to realize it's a 5-point commitment to get the penetration masteries, but because you have to get the 4 points in the first mastery and then 1% or the 1 extra point in the percentage mastery. So 5 mastery points is a big deal. It'll mess up what you can put in offense quite a bit, and at the same time in utility, most AP mids will want to get the the blue buff mastery. Or if they don't want the blue buff mastery that extends the duration of neutral buffs, they'll probably want to be going for defensive tree because they need the HP. So hybrid pen runes, though, those are really good. Hybrid pen runes are amazing. I highly recommend them on anybody who does hybrid damage. To give examples of people that benefit from hybrid pen runes, Shyvana, Singed, Ari, anybody who does both AP and physical damage, which is everybody that does AP damage because you have your physical auto attack. You can make some arguments for maybe Orianna because she has her passive, and I'm not sure which one maths out in the end. But in general, like Annie, getting extra damage on your physical attacks is a huge deal on an AP mid. And they're still ridiculously efficient. I highly recommend hybrid penetration runes on just about anybody. I know they're effective on Singe. I know they're effective on most AP mids. Ahri is a good example because she has some true damage, so it's like, well, you still benefit from that. Jarvan would not benefit because he only gets a standard for AP damage, but it's like you have to really have low magic damage because everybody has an auto attack, and unless the auto attack is unusable or provides magic damage on its own, chances are you want to get the penetration runes, the hybrid penetration. But yeah, you just don't have the mastery points to get both penetrations. And realize that when you go for the physical penetration, it is an early game thing. It is a very, very early games type of thing to do. Because eventually, yeah, it's like, alright, I got an extra 7 armor penetration. Now my 70 damage auto attack will not do much to the 200 armor guy. Like, that's still going to happen. So, you don't want to sacrifice too many points for the early game. There have been a lot of AP mids starting with a red potion, though. And actually, Ehamda from the Salad Bar, I think it's now the Hedgehog Brigade. And they're actually playing the LCS promotion qualifiers. I believe he's ran AD reds and red potions on Ahri and stuff like that. And it's really comically effective at winning early game lane. But it doesn't scale well. There are some players that run 30% offense, or 30 offense points. I believe Twisted Fate in Korea did that the other day. I cannot remember the name of the player, though. So it is possibly viable to go for like the full offense. But realize it's not 24 offense or 25 offense, 5 in utility. If they're going offense, they're going all the way in. That's an interesting question. That one requires a lot of math, and what you have to really kind of value certain stuff. And despite having enough armor pen to theoretically completely negate armor, why do melee minions take less damage from, let's say, auto attacks than caster minions? I tested this out. They take the same amount of damage. This is one of those things where I actually like this because you got to think about your process control and your test control. The questions I have are, if you're using the offensive mastery, the 21-point offensive mastery, were you hitting the minions when they had less than half their HP? And do not forget that melee minions have more armor growth than ranged minions. Excuse me? Ranged minions have really high magic resist growth. Well, not really high, but higher magic resist growth. I believe melee and cannon minions have higher armor growth. So casters will have more trouble with the ranged minions, and the AD carries will have more trouble with the melee and cannon minions. By AD carries, I actually mean AP carries because they'll have a much lower AD. But yeah, no, I tested it out. Minions were taking the same amount of damage unless they had less than half HP. And when's mahvel? Mahvel's coming up next, don't worry. Thank you, Don Yagamouth, for your fabulous barrage of questions. Okay, question number 7. Could League stand to have more high-end items? As it stands right now, the game is full of mid-tier items other than Infinity Edge and Triforce. Think Reaver/Mystic Staff that build into other things. This question comes from Binjin. Well, Binjin, you have to think about how Riot balanced the game right now. So AD carries are still incredibly powerful. A lot of people have said they're weak, but that talk has actually kind of fallen off recently. So people still have this really good perspective of AD carries. They're really powerful late game. The way AP carries scale late into the game is actually more of a burst caster rather than sustained damage. The exception would be characters like Ryze. And there's a reason for this. Think of the stats that AD carries scale on. Attack speed, attack damage, critical chance, critical strike damage, armor penetration, and all the types of armor penetration. And I want to say those are the main few. Think about what AP carries scale on. They have their own penetrations, the magic penetrations. AP, CDR. That's it. Those are the 3 AP stats. And because of that, like, alright, maybe you can get a Archangel Staff, and you'll have mana scaling now, and some characters do have mana scaling, but for the most part, you're going to be thinking of the characters that scale with AP, CDR, and penetration. And in the case of mana, the mana scaling, it's really just more AP. So, AP carries, when you add damage to them, you're adding a chunk of damage. When you add 40 damage to all of their skills combined, their combo will do 40 more damage before you factor in penetration. When you add 40 damage to an AD carry, who has a really high critical strike chance, like let's say like AD carry has 100% critical strike chance. You give him 40 damage. He now gets 80 damage per auto attack. You give him 50% critical strike chance. That 40 damage is now not chance but damage. That 40 damage is now 100 damage, and they scale very quickly. So the question would be not could it have more high-end items, but how would the AP carry scale? Because the AD carry is in a really good position right now. Infinity Edge is a fantastic item. Triforce is actually still a really good item, just not as scaling. And if AP carries were not scaling to the same degree that AD carries were, then you just run into this problem where it's like, yeah, cool, you have AD carries that can be better late game when they're already really powerful late game. So the answer I would have is no, just because of how characters scale in the game. At the same time, you know, a 5,000, 6,000, if you already have a 5 out of 6 item build closeout item, in a lot of cases could end stalemates in games. But I think that I think once games reach that point, if the other team has a chance to come back, Riot actually likes those games. Because they're incredibly exciting as a player. They're incredibly exciting as a spectator and as a pro, like just across the board. If you're watching one of those games, where you're, you know, at 5-6 item builds, and you're eventually 6-6, and the guy is 5-6 and right behind you though, like, you know, he's 100 gold from his next big item, then, well, oh my god, it's the hypest game ever, and it's terrifying. It is scary actually to play those games. So I don't think Riot wants to put in that easy closeout item. So there could be a really late game item, but all I think it would do is make AD carries more powerful. You could make something like Deathfire Grasp or something like that would scale really well with AP carries and just increase their damage even more. Hell, add in AP crit chance. But I think in the end, just because of how characters scale, that no, there will not be high-end items. And I like the idea. I actually like the idea. But the way that there's a lot of more mid-tier items right now means that once the games reach late game, if you're relatively close, you know, if you're at the 50-minute mark, one team has 70,000 gold, you have 6,500, you're still behind by 5k, you can still fight hard, and you can still win. League of Legends games are very, very hard to predict unless there's just such a massive insurmountable advantage, which usually has to include a big experience advantage as well as gold advantage for one team to come back. Thank you, Bidgen, for that fabulous question. And that is all for right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let's go ahead, scroll through these questions really quickly. Thanks, Zechariah2255. Thank you, AntiPeach. Thank you, Joe Kim's Z123. Thank you, Foxacon94. Thank you, TheEmsx. Thank you, Don Yagamoth. And thank you, Bingen. That's all for now, folks. Adios. I hope you enjoyed this. And I might do some more questions. I'm sorry this video came out so late, but I just wanted to get this first chunk out, and more might be coming later. I will not make any promises. Adios.